I still remember that night like it was yesterday, even though it feels like a lifetime ago. It all started with a flashback that I can't seem to shake. Mark and I, side by side, in the middle of a high security auction house. We were after diamonds, real sparkling diamonds that seemed to capture a piece of the night sky, and everything was running smoothly. We moved like a well oiled machine, communicating in hushed tones and quick gestures. I could feel the tension in the air, thick as fog, as we bypassed security cameras and dodged laser beams with a kind of practiced ease. It was one of those moments where everything just clicked, and I was riding high on adrenaline and the thrill of it all. Then, as if someone pulled a switch, the alarms blared. Suddenly, the soft hum of our coordinated plan was shattered by the deafening sound of sirens and red lights flashing all around. In the chaos, I turned to Mark, expecting to see him by my side, ready to improvise our escape. But he was gone. I blinked in disbelief as the panic set in. He had disappeared into the pandemonium without so much as a word. Before I could process what was happening, a squad of police officers stormed in. One of them grabbed me roughly by the arm. "Freeze!" he barked. In that instant, I was cuffed, my heart pounding with shock and betrayal. There I was, surrounded by the cold, unyielding metal of handcuffs, feeling the sting of betrayal sharper than any pain the officers could inflict. Mark had left me to face it all alone. Prison was nothing like I'd ever imagined. The days melted together into a never-ending blur of loneliness, anger, and regret. I sat in that cramped cell with nothing but my own thoughts for company, and every minute the memory of that night burned in my mind. I replayed the moment of abandonment over and over, wondering why Mark had vanished when we needed each other most. The questions haunted me relentlessly. In those long, cold nights, the taste of betrayal was as bitter as the stale air around me. I made a vow in that dark place, a promise to myself that if I ever got out, I'd make Mark pay. Every injustice I felt, every second of anger and hurt, was locked away with those prison walls. I swore I'd never let that betrayal define me. Instead, I would use it as fuel, a spark to ignite a fire of revenge that would eventually burn everything down. And so I clung to that promise as a lifeline through those brutal, endless days behind bars. 5 years later, the day finally came when I was released. Stepping out of prison felt like emerging from a long, dark tunnel into a world that had already moved on without me. The city was the same, yet so different. Familiar streets had new faces, new energy, and I felt like an outsider in a world that wasn't waiting for me. But even as I tried to piece together a new life, I couldn't help but catch snippets of the past. I heard murmurs in the underground scene, whispers of a new power couple taking over the streets. Mark, my Mark, was back in the picture, and he wasn't alone. He was now inseparable from a woman named Elena. Elena, just hearing her name sent a fresh surge of fury through me. Mark had replaced me with her, not only in our personal lives, but in the criminal empire we'd once dreamed of running together. It felt like a final, crushing blow, a deliberate act of erasure. They were making headlines, setting trends, and building an empire built on the very betrayal that had shattered my life. I couldn't stand the thought of it. Every story, every rumor about them was a reminder of what I'd lost and what I still longed to reclaim. One cold evening, as I sat alone in a dingy diner, somewhere on the outskirts of the city, I stared into the bottom of a cup of coffee, the dark liquid swirling as if it held the secrets of my past. I couldn't help but mutter to myself, "I'm not just going to rebuild my life. I'm going to take back what's mine." That was more than a thought. It was a declaration, a promise forged in the fires of my own suffering. The betrayal that had once pinned me down now sparked something inside me, a burning resolve to rewrite the rules and control my own destiny. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The scars from prison, the endless nights of anger, and the bitter taste of betrayal were still raw. But I also knew that I was no longer the same person I had been before. The years behind bars had changed me. They had hardened me, made me smarter, and filled me with a determination that no one could snuff out. I wasn't going to let Mark, or anyone else, dictate the course of my life anymore. Instead, I was going to take the reins, reclaim my power, and build a future that belonged entirely to me. As I left the diner that night, the city lights flickering like distant stars, I felt a strange mix of bitterness, and hope. The past was a heavy burden, but it was also the fuel that would drive me forward. I had seen the depths of betrayal and the pain of abandonment, and I had emerged with a clear vision to control my own fate and, if necessary, to make Mark pay for every second of the time he'd left me to suffer. In that moment of clarity, standing on a rain-soaked street with nothing but my resolve and a heart full of fire, I knew that my journey was just beginning. I wasn't going to let the world move on while I remained trapped in the past. I was ready to reclaim my life, piece by piece, and to reshape my destiny on my own terms. The fall had been hard, brutal even, but it had set the stage for something greater, a chance to rise, to rebuild, and ultimately to control the fate of the one who had once replaced me. I started staking out Mark and Elena a few weeks after my release, quietly, methodically, like a shadow in the night. I found a good vantage point in an old building overlooking one of their usual meeting spots, a secluded courtyard behind a rundown warehouse in the industrial district. From there, I could see them gather with their crew, their faces lit by the dull glow of street lamps as they huddled together, deep in conversation. It was hard not to be reminded of all the years of planning and scheming that had led to that fateful betrayal. Now, I was watching them plan their next big operation. Over several nights, I noticed a pattern. Mark and Elena, along with a mix of familiar and new faces, would meet, discuss plans in hushed tones, and review blueprints and schedules on a portable tablet. I pieced together snippets of their conversation when I caught fragments of words like timeline, buyer, and Metropolitan Museum. Then one night, as I was hidden in the shadows, it all clicked. They were planning a heist at the Metropolitan Museum during a high-profile gala scheduled for 2 months from now. The target was something called the Celestial Scepter, a legendary artifact rumored to be priceless, at least in the circles we operated in. The revelation hit me like a punch in the gut. Here I was, sitting in a cold, dark building, with nothing but a pair of binoculars and a notebook, while Mark and Elena schemed their next move. It wasn't just any job. It was a high-stakes, meticulously planned operation that promised a massive payoff. I scribbled notes furiously in my little notebook, trying to capture every detail, the time of the meeting, the layout of their gathering, and the subtle cues in their body language that suggested excitement and confidence. It was all too familiar. The thrill of planning a heist, but this time, it was personal. Mark had left me with nothing, and now he was out there, back in the game with a new partner. I couldn't just sit on the sidelines and watch them orchestrate their grand scheme. So I decided to dig deeper. I reached out to some old contacts, people who owed me favors from my earlier days. I made a few discreet calls, and soon enough, I was piecing together more details about their plan. One guy, an ex-security consultant who had worked with high-profile auctions, confirmed that the Metropolitan Museum was indeed on their radar. Another contact, a tech-savvy friend, told me that they'd already assembled a specialized crew for this heist, complete with a timeline that pinpointed every crucial moment of the plan. They had a buyer lined up too, a shadowy figure known only by the moniker the Curator, who was notorious in underground circles for snapping up rare artifacts. As I gathered this information, I started noticing something odd about their dynamic. Mark, the one who'd once been my trusted partner, now seemed to be playing second fiddle. Elena was the one calling the shots. During one of the meetings, I observed from afar, while Mark's contributions were minimal. A few grunts here and there, Elena was the one laying out the plans, dictating the crew's movements, and even smoothing over any disputes among the team. It wasn't the partnership I had known before. Mark and I used to have a seamless connection, a balance where we both brought something essential to the table. But now, it was as if Elena had taken over entirely, and Mark was content to play a subordinate role. I sat back and wondered what was really going on between them. Had Mark truly fallen under Elena's spell? Or was it just a matter of power? Elena, with her steely determination and commanding presence, simply knew how to seize control. Either way, it was clear that the operation was hers in all but name. And that realization stung. Not only had Mark replaced me years ago, but now he was allowing someone else to control his fate, and the fate of our criminal ventures. The more I learned, the more I realized I couldn't take on this challenge alone. Infiltrating their operation and turning the tables would require more than just my own wits and determination. I needed allies, trusted partners who could help me navigate this complex, dangerous world. I began making discreet calls and arranging meetings with a few names I trusted from my past escapades. I wasn't going to re enter this game as a lone wolf. I needed a crew, people who were as hungry for redemption and revenge as I was. I spent nights sketching out a plan, meticulously mapping out the details of their heist, the timing of their moves, and the points where I could slip in unnoticed. I knew that if I could infiltrate their operation, I could use their own plan against them. I imagined the moment I'd step into their world, disguised and ready to sow seeds of doubt and disruption from within. I'd become the wild card they never saw coming, and in the process, I'd reclaim what was rightfully mine. Every piece of information I gathered, every secret whispered on the phone, and every observation made in the dim glow of streetlights added to the puzzle. I knew the risks were enormous. One wrong move could mean disaster, but the thought of seeing Mark and Elena's empire crumble from the inside kept me going. I wasn't just planning a heist to steal an artifact. I was planning a personal vendetta, a chance to rewrite my own destiny. In the end, the decision was made. I was going to infiltrate their operation, become part of their team, and use that position to turn their plan against them. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed to gather the right people, and I needed to be ready for everything they'd throw at me. The stakes were high, and the game was about to change. As I packed up my notes and prepared to leave my hideout for the night, I couldn't help but smile bitterly. The old days were gone, but they were about to come back in a big way. Mark and Elena thought they had everything under control, that their plan was foolproof. Well, they had no idea what was coming. And tonight, under the cover of darkness, I began my long-awaited return to the game, ready to reclaim my place, ready to control my own fate, and most of all, ready to take back what was mine. I knew I couldn't do this alone. After months of tailing Mark and Elena, piecing together their plan for the heist at the Metropolitan Museum, I needed a team I could trust, old allies who owed me favors and who still remembered the fire we once shared for our craft. So I started reaching out. First, I called Jules. Jules had always been the tech wizard in our group, the one who could hack into any system and leave a digital trail so clean it might as well have been painted on canvas. I dialed his number on my burner phone, my heart pounding a little as I listened to the familiar ring. "Jules, it's me," I said as soon as he picked up, trying to keep my tone casual but laced with urgency. "Alara, damn, it's been too long." "What's up?" he replied, his voice warm yet edged with curiosity. I quickly laid out the plan, choosing my words carefully. "Listen, I've got a plan to steal the Celestial Scepter. Yeah, that legendary artifact Mark and Elena are targeting at the Met during the gala. I'm not just doing this for revenge. It's time I took back what's mine. I need your help to create a digital persona, something untraceable and slick. I want to become Sophia Laurent, a fresh identity that will let me slip into their operation without a trace." There was a brief pause on the other end. "Sophia Laurent, huh? That sounds deliciously mysterious. You know I'm in. I'll set up a digital trail that even the best trackers won't be able to follow. I can make you disappear online and reappear wherever you need to be." "Thanks, Jules. I knew I could count on you," I said, relief flooding through me. We wrapped up the call with promises to meet later that week to go over the finer details. Next, I reached out to Leo. Leo was our go-to for all things paperwork, an expert at forging documents and creating identities that even the most scrutinizing institutions would accept. I met him at a little diner where we used to meet back in the day. Over a slice of pie and lukewarm coffee, I laid out the plan. "Leo, I need you to work your magic," I said, sliding a folder across the table toward him. "I need documents that will back up my new persona, Sophia Laurent. I need a backstory, a history, everything that'll make it airtight. If I'm going to infiltrate Mark and Elena's crew, I need to be unassailable." He picked up the folder and flipped through its contents with practiced eyes. "You're really doing this, aren't you?" he asked, his tone a mix of amusement and admiration. "I'll get started on the forgeries. You want bank statements, college records, the whole works? I can have it ready in a week." "Perfect, Leo. I'm counting on you," I replied, feeling a surge of determination. His steady support always gave me a boost of confidence. Lastly, I needed to get Mia on board. Mia was the networker, our connection to the underground scene. She had her finger on the pulse of everything illicit, and was the best at spreading the word without drawing too much attention. I met her at a smoky backroom bar, the kind of place where secrets were traded over cheap whiskey. Mia, I need you to do something for me, I said, leaning in close so the noise wouldn't carry our conversation. I'm planning a heist, the big one. We're going after the Celestial Scepter. I need you to spread the word in the underground, quietly. Let our contacts know that there's a new player in town, someone named Sophia Loren who's not afraid to shake things up. Mia's eyes sparkled with mischief. Oh, Elara, you've always been the dramatic one, but I like it. I'll get the word out. Discreetly, of course. People will start whispering, and soon enough, everyone will know that something big is coming. With Jules, Leo, and Mia on board, I felt the old adrenaline rush of plotting something audacious. I gathered in a dimly lit room, a safe house that had seen better days, and spread out all the intel I had collected. Blueprints, photographs, snippets of conversations, every detail was pinned to a corkboard in front of me. I traced my finger along the layout of the Metropolitan Museum, marking the locations where Mark and Elena's crew were expected to strike. We spent hours bouncing ideas off each other. Jules showed me how his digital persona, Sophia Loren, would look online. A blend of glamour and mystery that was completely untraceable. Leo had already started forging documents that painted a convincing picture of her past, a story that was as intricate as it was believable. And Mia, ever the social butterfly of the underground, had begun planting subtle hints of our impending operation among key players. I was meticulous, obsessive even, as I ran through every possible scenario. What if they changed their plan last minute? I asked, tapping a pencil against my notebook. We need contingency plans. Jules nodded. I can set up alerts on their digital communications. If there's any change, you'll know within minutes. Leo leaned back in his chair, scribbling on a napkin. We need to ensure that all our documents are flawless. One tiny mistake and their investigators will tear our story apart. Mia chimed in. And don't forget, we need to keep this quiet. If the word gets out too soon, it could ruin everything. Every word, every discussion, felt like a step closer to reclaiming the control that had been ripped from me. I could feel the determination building inside me, a fire fueled by years of betrayal and the sting of abandonment. This wasn't just about a heist. It was about taking back my life, piece by piece. I ended our meeting with a sense of unwavering resolve. This is it, guys, I said, meeting each of their eyes. This is my chance to take control of my fate. I'm not just going to let Mark and Elena run this show. We're going to steal the Celestial Scepter from right under their noses, and when we do, the whole underground will know who really runs this game. They all nodded, their expressions serious and determined. In that moment, we were a team united by a common purpose, one that was rooted in old grudges, fresh wounds, and the burning desire for redemption. As I left that room later, my mind buzzing with plans and possibilities, I couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. I was stepping back into a world I thought I'd left behind, but this time, I was in control. With my crew assembled and our plan taking shape, I was ready to rewrite the rules. Mark and Elena had gotten too comfortable, too sure of their victory. They had no idea that the real game was just beginning. I walked out into the cool night, the city lights a blur as I made my way to my safe house. Every step felt like a declaration, a promise that I would reclaim my destiny no matter what it took. And as I looked up at the star-studded sky, I whispered to myself, tonight a new chapter begins. This is my chance to take back what's mine. I stood in front of the mirror for what felt like an eternity, tweaking every last detail of my new persona. Gone was the worn-out, vengeful woman the world once knew. In her place, I had carefully crafted Sophia Loren, a name that exuded confidence, sophistication, and just a hint of mystery. I applied bold red lipstick, styled my hair in loose waves, and practiced a lilting accent until it sounded natural in my ears. I even adjusted my posture, forcing myself to stand tall and look directly into my own eyes, as if promising that this was the person I was meant to be. Tonight, I wasn't Elara, the betrayed and bitter ex-thief. I was Sophia Loren, a force to be reckoned with. The plan was simple: infiltrate the bar where Mark and Elena were holding a recruitment meeting for their next big operation, and secure my place within their crew. I took a deep breath, grabbed my bag, and stepped out into the cool night, feeling the buzz of adrenaline mixed with a quiet determination that pulsed through my veins. As I approached the dimly lit bar, I could already hear low murmurs and laughter seeping out into the street. I smoothed down my sleek blazer and adjusted my hair one last time before pushing through the door. The interior was a mix of modern industrial chic and worn out charm, just the kind of place where underground figures met to plan their next heist. I scanned the room, and there they were: Mark, Elena, and a few of their crew members clustered around a table in the back, deep in conversation. I took a deep breath and walked over, maintaining a casual, confident stride. The eyes of a couple of unsuspicious bystanders flicked my way, but no one seemed to care much about a new face in the bar. I reached the table and cleared my throat gently. "Hi, I'm Sophia Laurent," I said, offering a warm, confident smile that I hoped would mask any lingering traces of nervousness. For a split second, I caught Mark's eye. His gaze seemed to linger on me, and for a moment, I feared he might recognize something familiar in my features. But I didn't give him time to dwell on it. I simply kept smiling and launched into my pitch, my voice steady and melodic. "I couldn't help but overhear that you're gearing up for a big operation," I continued. "I specialize in creating digital trails, securing identities, and blending into any crowd. I think I can offer something unique to your team." Elena's eyes lit up immediately. She was the kind of person who appreciated bold ideas and a certain audacity. "That's intriguing," she said, leaning forward. "Sophia, you're saying you can make us disappear digitally if needed? You know how much that matters." I nodded, feeling a surge of satisfaction at her immediate interest. "Absolutely. I've spent years perfecting my craft, and I've developed techniques that not only erase footprints, but also create convincing new identities from scratch. In our line of work, that's priceless." Mark, however, wasn't as easily swayed. He narrowed his eyes at me, his expression hard to read. "You remind me of someone," he said slowly, his voice low and measured. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. For a heartbeat, I almost laughed. A short, sharp laugh intended to diffuse the tension. "Well, that's flattering," I replied casually, but inside I was already bracing for what his suspicion might mean. I knew his tone too well. It was the tone of someone who had once trusted too easily and been burned by it. I forced a smile and continued. "I assure you, I'm exactly who I say I am, and I'm here to offer my expertise." Elena shot Mark a quick glance, as if silently urging him to let it go. "Mark, let's not overthink it," she said, smiling warmly at me. "Sophia, why don't you tell us a bit more about your background? We're always looking for fresh talent, especially if it comes with solid skills." I took the opportunity to elaborate, weaving a tale that was part truth, part well-crafted fiction. "I've been in the game long enough to know that the digital realm is just as important as the physical one. I've built identities from scratch for clients in need of a fresh start, and I've even helped a few, let's just say, disappear when circumstances got too tight. I pride myself on my discretion and my ability to adapt on the fly." As I spoke, I scanned the room, watching for any signs of disapproval or hidden recognition. The other crew members exchanged nods and murmurs of approval, and even Mark's stern expression seemed to soften a fraction. Still, his eyes never left mine, as if he were trying to measure up some secret formula I wasn't privy to. The unease in his gaze was palpable, and it sent a shiver down my spine, reminding me that my infiltration was a risky play, one that could unravel at any moment. After what felt like an eternity of conversation, Elena finally leaned back and smiled. "All right, Sophia," she said, her tone warm and decisive. "I think we're ready to bring you on board. We need someone with your skills, and I believe you can fit right in with our team." Mark gave a curt nod, though his eyes still held a trace of suspicion. "Welcome aboard," he said, his voice clipped, as if this was more of a reluctant formality than a heartfelt welcome. His tone wasn't enough to shake my determination, but it was a clear sign that I would need to tread carefully around him. As the meeting wrapped up, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of relief and lingering anxiety. On the one hand, I had successfully infiltrated their operation. My new persona, Sophia Laurent, was accepted into their fold. On the other hand, Mark's wary look and that cryptic remark, "You remind me of someone," gnawed at me. It was a reminder that beneath the surface, things were far more complicated than they appeared, and his suspicion could very well be the first crack in the carefully constructed facade of their operation. Walking out of the bar that night, I felt the weight of the stakes settle on my shoulders. The plan was working, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Mark's eyes would be on me, scrutinizing every move I made. My heart pounded with a cocktail of adrenaline and uncertainty as I made my way back to my safe house. I knew that every step I took in this new role was a step deeper into a dangerous game, a game where one misstep could cost me everything. Yet, despite the unease, I was determined. I had come too far, and I was not about to let old ghosts or fresh suspicions derail my plan. My transformation into Sophia Laurent was complete, and I had secured a place in their circle. Now, the real work would begin. Infiltrating their operation from the inside, gathering the information I needed, and eventually turning their own scheme against them. As I sat in my car later that night, the city lights blurred outside my window. I allowed myself a small, resolute smile. I whispered to myself, I'm in, and this is just the beginning. The risk was enormous, and Mark's lingering suspicion was a constant reminder that nothing was guaranteed. But in that moment, I felt the thrill of the challenge and the promise that I was finally taking back control of my fate. I knew that the next steps would require every bit of cunning and determination I possessed. And though the road ahead was fraught with uncertainty, I was ready to navigate it, one careful step at a time. After all, I wasn't just here to blend in. I was here to upend everything they thought they knew about loyalty, trust, and betrayal. And with every breath, I was closer to rewriting my destiny. I was in deep now. Playing along with Mark and Elena's plan wasn't just about earning their trust. It was about weaving a web of my own. Every meeting, every strategy session, I made sure to contribute just enough to prove my worth, all the while dropping subtle hints that might make them question each other's loyalties. I laughed at their jokes, nodded at their suggestions, and offered clever tweaks to their plan. All the while, I was silently planting seeds of doubt in the back of my mind, watching them squirm just a little whenever their eyes met. One humid night after a particularly intense planning session at our hideout, a cramped warehouse that smelled of old wood and stale coffee, I found myself alone with Mark in one of the darker corners of the room. The others had trickled out, leaving behind only the echo of whispered plans and the soft hum of an air conditioner struggling to keep up. Mark's eyes were fixed on me, and there was a seriousness there that hadn't been present before. Slowly, he stepped closer until he was right in my face, his tone low and dangerous. "Who are you, really?" he demanded, his gaze piercing as if he were trying to strip away the carefully constructed layers of my new persona. There was a vulnerability in his question, a raw edge that betrayed his own doubts, but also his lingering suspicion. I met his stare without flinching, the confidence in my eyes belying the storm raging inside me. "Someone who's here to get the job done," I replied coolly, my voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through my veins. Mark's jaw tightened, and I could tell he wasn't entirely convinced. For a moment, silence stretched between us, a silent battle of wills where every unspoken word hung heavily in the air. I knew that look. It was the look of a man who had once trusted me completely, and now found himself questioning every move I made. I forced a smile, trying to diffuse the tension, and turned away as if nothing had happened. But I knew that conversation was far from over. Later that same night, as the meeting room emptied and the low murmur of our crew faded into the background, Elena pulled me aside. We found ourselves near a stack of old crates in the back of the warehouse, where the dim light cast long, secretive shadows. Her expression was different from Mark's, softer yet calculating. "Alara," she said quietly, her tone more confiding than accusatory, "I know who you really are." I tensed for a moment, but she continued before I could respond. "I want to make a deal with you. I'm tired of playing second fiddle to you, and I know Mark has his suspicions. What do you say we double-cross him together?" I blinked, feigning surprise, though a part of me was already thrilled at the prospect. "Double-cross him?" I echoed, my tone nonchalant, but my mind racing. "You mean work with me to bring him down?" Elena nodded, her eyes glinting with that dangerous mix of ambition and determination. Yes, I know what you've been up to, your little act as Sophia Laurent, and I think we can both benefit if we take Mark down. We each have our scores to settle, don't we? I gave a slight, measured laugh, playing along as if I hadn't been planning my own maneuver all along. Of course, Elena. I'm all for a bit of creative collaboration, as long as we're clear that this is about getting the job done. I'm in. Inside, however, I was already drafting my own double-cross strategy. I wasn't going to let either of them have full control. Not Mark, and certainly not Elena. I had my own agenda, one that would let me reclaim my power and ultimately my rightful place in this twisted game. The conversation with Elena ended with a handshake that seemed to seal our temporary alliance. But as I watched her walk away, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I was playing with fire. The tension in the room, the silent stares exchanged earlier with Mark, and Elena's calculated offer all pointed to one undeniable fact. The night of the gala was fast approaching, and with it, the stakes were about to skyrocket. In the following days, every moment was a blur of meticulous planning and careful maneuvering. I was constantly on my toes, juggling my role as Sophia Laurent, keeping one step ahead of Mark's suspicions, and navigating the treacherous waters of Elena's shifting alliances. I spent countless nights poring over blueprints, timetables, and digital maps of the Metropolitan Museum, determined to figure out every detail of their heist plan. I even intercepted snippets of their internal communications, piecing together a timeline that was both impressive and infuriatingly precise. At times, I felt like I was living a double life. One part me was the ruthless schemer plotting revenge, while the other part was still the betrayed hurt woman who had been left to rot in a cell. Those dualities collided whenever I looked in the mirror at night, seeing the determined yet haunted eyes of a woman who had learned to survive in a world of betrayal. I knew that the gala was the turning point. That night would be the culmination of everything we'd been planning, a moment when all the tension, all the seeds of doubt would finally burst into full bloom. I could already feel it in my bones. The air would be thick with anticipation, the crew on edge, and Mark's suspicion reaching a boiling point. And then, in the midst of it all, I would make my move. I would be the one to control the outcome, to seize back the power that had been stolen from me for far too long. By the end of this phase, I was consumed by a singular burning resolve. I wasn't just here to play a part. I was here to upend the entire operation. The delicate balance between my double cross and their plan was teetering on a knife's edge, and I intended to tip it in my favor. I had already seen enough cracks in their alliance, enough hints that their partnership was built on shifting loyalties. Now was the time to exploit those weaknesses. As I lay in bed that night, my mind replayed the events of the day like a montage of possibilities. I thought about Mark's piercing question and Elena's tempting offer. Every detail, every glance, every word had led to this point. And with the gala looming on the horizon, the pressure was mounting, and my every decision felt like it could either be the key to my comeback or the nail in my coffin. I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, "This is it, my chance to take control of my fate." The uncertainty was palpable, but so was my determination. I knew the risks were enormous. Mark's suspicion was real, and Elena's alliance was as treacherous as it was promising. But I was ready to play the long game, to let the tension build until it exploded into an opportunity I could exploit. The double cross was set in motion, and as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't help but smile at the thought of what was to come. I was in too deep now, and there was no turning back. The gala was coming, and with it, the chance to rewrite the rules of this dangerous game. And I, Sophia Laurent, was ready to be the wild card that would change everything. The night of the gala had finally arrived, and everything was set in motion. I could feel the buzz in the air even before I stepped out of my car. The Metropolitan Museum was decked out in its full glory, lights shimmering off its grand facade, and inside, Mark, Elena, and their crew were executing their plan as if it were second nature. They moved with precision, flawless, coordinated, and, in their minds, invincible. But they had no idea what was coming. I'd spent the past weeks preparing for this very moment. Every detail of my plan had been meticulously laid out, and the biggest trick of all, the celestial scepter was already swapped. While Mark and Elena were busy orchestrating their heist, I had stealthily replaced the genuine artifact with an almost perfect fake. It wasn't just a clever trick, it was a statement. I wasn't here to let them take everything without a fight. Inside the museum during the gala, chaos began to erupt just as planned. I watched, heart pounding, as the first sirens wailed in the distance. Suddenly, the smooth rhythm of the operation shattered into frantic commotion. Security alarms blared, lights flickered wildly, and people started scrambling in every direction. In the midst of the bedlam, police officers poured into the building, their shouts and orders cutting through the confusion like knives. Mark and Elena were caught completely off guard. One moment, they were calmly directing their crew. The next, panic spread across their faces as they tried to orchestrate an escape. I could see Mark's eyes darting around, looking for a way out, while Elena frantically barked orders to her team. Their confident facade crumbled quickly. It was as if their perfect plan had been upended in an instant, all because of a tiny switch I had made earlier. From my discreet vantage point, I saw the moment unfold like a scene from a movie. As officers closed in, Mark and Elena attempted to make a break for it. But the moment they stepped into the crossfire of the chaos, things went horribly wrong. A stray bullet, a misfired smoke grenade. None of it was my doing, of course, but it only added to the pandemonium. In the ensuing chaos, Mark and his crew were overwhelmed, and I could see him struggling to escape the net of law enforcement. Meanwhile, my carefully assembled crew was executing our part of the plan to perfection. Jules, Leo, Mia, and the others had positioned themselves strategically, ensuring that I could slip away with the real celestial scepter. I could feel a sense of pride and determination swell within me as I watched them at work. They moved with the same urgency and precision that had once defined our entire operation, and it felt like the old days. But with a twist, this time we were the ones calling the shots. In the thick of the chaos, my crew and I made our getaway. We slipped out of the museum through a side exit that we had scouted weeks before. I remember my hands trembling slightly as I cradled the genuine celestial scepter, a symbol of not only the heist, but of my long-awaited revenge. The artifact felt heavier than I expected, as if it carried the weight of all the years I'd spent plotting this moment. But I couldn't help myself. I took a minute and got back into the museum. I needed Mark to realize what had happened. I swiped off my makeup and headed in. From a safe distance, I watched the unfolding drama inside the museum. The police had cornered Mark, and he was being handcuffed. I could see him struggle against the restraints, his eyes flashing with anger and disbelief. And then, in the midst of the turmoil, something happened that sent a chill down my spine. As Mark was led away, he locked eyes with me across the crowded room. For a split second, just a fleeting, electrifying moment, I saw something in his gaze. Recognition, shock, and perhaps the dawning realization that the woman standing in the wings, operating as Sophia Laurent, was more than just a new recruit. It was a piece of his past, returning to haunt him. That brief moment on stage, that one look, was enough to set my pulse racing. It felt like the culmination of everything I had planned, and yet it also hinted at deeper, unresolved tensions. Mark's eyes, filled with a mix of fury and regret, told me he knew something was off. He might have suspected all along that I wasn't who I appeared to be. I didn't let that deter me, though. If anything, it only strengthened my resolve. Back with my crew, we regrouped quickly. The night was still young, and even as sirens faded into the distance, the adrenaline kept coursing through my veins. I clutched the celestial scepter tightly, feeling its cool, solid weight as a tangible reminder of the power I had just reclaimed. There was no time to bask in victory for long. The operation had to be sealed with precision. I gave the order, and we melted into the darkness, disappearing into the labyrinthine backstreets of the city. Each step away from the museum was a step further from the life Mark and Elena had built, a life that had stolen everything from me. In that moment, as I looked back one last time at the flashing lights and chaos behind me, I knew that the game had irrevocably changed. The heist had been executed flawlessly on their end, until it wasn't. And while they scrambled in disarray, my carefully planted plan had come to fruition. I had taken back the one thing they thought would secure their legacy, and in doing so, I had rewritten the rules. Mark's arrest, the public spectacle, and that one charged look we exchanged. Everything pointed to one inescapable truth. I was not the victim any longer. I stood there, heart pounding in the cold night air, watching the museum fade into the distance. The future was a murky, uncertain expanse, but for the first time in years, I felt in control. As I drove away with my crew, the weight of the celestial scepter in the back seat felt symbolic of my own newfound power, an unspoken promise that I was ready to reclaim everything that had been taken from me. But that one look from Mark haunted me still. In that fleeting moment, as his eyes met mine, I knew he was onto something, perhaps even aware that I had been the one pulling the strings all along. That realization sent a shiver down my spine, leaving me to wonder what his next move might be. For now, though, the night belonged to us. We had outsmarted them, and I had taken a monumental step toward controlling my own fate. But as the sirens faded and the city settled back into its nocturnal rhythm, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was only just beginning.